And we are set. Okay, good moyed, moyed simcha, everybody. Piska tova. This is Hashoeva. This is our Simchas Beis Hashoeva. Tavshin Pei Aleph, and oh boy, it is a different Simchas Beis Hashoeva. I was going to get my little goodie bag with me, but I'm not even in the sukkah, so I'm going to have to wait until afterwards. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining on this very special evening. And I want to start off really by thanking the people who made this possible, and that is Eric and Jackie Nussbaum, who are sponsoring tonight's event. Eric's father's yahrzeit is always in Sukkot, and this year, in fact, he is the 30th yahrzeit of his father, Yaakov Moshe ben Menachem Mendel, Mr. Jacob Nussbaum Olav Hashalom. And I think that it is especially a special year in that it is also the year that his namesake, Yaakov Moshe, his grandson, got engaged just this week to Olivia from New Jersey. And so, greater simcha as Baruch Hashem, as that's full circle. And I want to thank Eric for pushing this to happen, because this is a year where we're basically just surviving to a certain degree. We're just trying to recreate our lives and survive. And he pushed us to make sure that this would happen. And although it's different, we're not there with a barbecue outside in the sukkah like we would be on a regular year. We have really something very special this evening. So thank you everybody very much for joining. Those who are in the room right now, those who are streaming live, and those who will be streaming and watching the recording later. I just want to start off. We have the zechus of hearing the divrei bracha, dvar Torah to start off this evening, as the Simchas Beis Hashoeva always does and should, with from Rabbi Moshe Teitelbaum, who has been our Rav for decades and decades. Baruch Hashem, is a privilege to start off. Rabbi, would you care to start off the evening with Dvar Torah?
Thank you, Rabbi Trump. And it's an honor to be with you tonight. An honor to participate in a Simchas Beis Hashoeva in memory of Yaakov Moshe ben Menachem Mendel, a very, very special leader of Yiddishkeit in Queens in New York, let alone of his own beautiful family. And so we do appreciate, as we have for so many years, the efforts of Jackie and Eric to bring his memory as a source of bracha to us all, and may it indeed be with blessing for your family on this time of simcha, and always, and Emir Tzashem, for good things in your mishpacha for years and years to come. The topic tonight is Diras Arye, getting out of the typical sukkah, changing, becoming flexible enough for this very challenging time, for these challenging days, and for the challenge of sukkahs during challenging times. And we're going to hear about some very interesting efforts, great noble efforts and successes in bringing sukkahs, the Yom Tov, Yiddishkeit, to its best possible position in people's lives, in young people's lives, in spite of the challenges of our time. I'm going to talk very briefly about a very specific kind of challenge and how the Torah Sheval Peh deals with that kind of challenge. You can imagine that a sukkah, the temporary abode of these holy days, is very hard to build aboard ship. Imagine you're traveling on the high seas and you've got to put up a sukkah. After all, that's what the Yom Tov calls for. This is the fundamental machlokas, of difference of opinion between the two great leaders of the Jewish people, Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Akiva. When you're out on the ocean and you build your sukkah on the deck, right, on the promenade of the QE2 or QE3, beautiful sukkah. How sturdy does it have to be kosher? Because the winds out on the open seas can be ferocious. The Ruach Mitsuya, as it's called, the typical wind, is far stronger than the wind here on dry land. So the question then is, if a sukkah would not be able to stand because the typical winds are so much stronger at sea, would it still be kosher? If you used that sukkah and you were just lucky enough that the wind wasn't blowing at the time, and you were able to get in an hour or two in that sukkah, and then the winds picked up as they typically would, and destroyed your sukkah. Well, did you actually do the mitzvah? Were you in a kosher sukkah? After all, where you were, that sukkah wasn't able to stand. It wasn't viable for the 7 days. Fundamental machlokas. Rabbi Gamliel says, that's not kosher. Rabbi Akiva says, oh, it's fine. They actually once had this happen. They were on a boat. Rabbi Akiva built the sukkah, and the wind destroyed the sukkah, decimated the sukkah. Rabbi Gamliel said to him, you can just imagine with a little bit of a cynicism, so, Rabbi Akiva, where's your sukkah? And yet, the halacha is with Rabbi Akiva, that if it can stand, even briefly, but if it's the kind of sukkah that would be what you would be able to use 7 days on dry land, then it's kosher. So the whole definition of the diras arai is shaped by this particular machlokas, and then lahalacha by the opinion of Rabbi Akiva. That what we are looking at is the fact that if you're in very, very different circumstances, unusual circumstances, such as you're out on the ocean, well, then you're already not in the place of what's called keva. You're already out of the typical element. And so what it will take in order to be yatsa the mitzvah is not going to be what you must have in the typical environment. It's going to be what it takes to be yatsa the mitzvah in the changed environment, says Rabbi Gamliel. Rabbi Akiva says no. Rabbi Akiva says we're going to do the best we can with that limit of what's typical and what's normal. That's enough. All that can be asked of us is do the best that we can. And we are going to say, if typically we are able to have a sukkah on dry land, and that would last 7 days, that's kosher. It's going to be kosher aboard ship as well. There's a lesson there for a tempest-tossed people, Am Yisrael. We are sometimes not able to do our Yom Tov, our Chag, our mitzvos in easy circumstances. And Rabbi Akiva's suggestion to us halachically is, you do the best that you can. You try to say, well, if this were in normal times or in the right, correct place, the typical place would be kosher, it's kosher now as well. And so, forging ahead, doing the best that we can, saying that we're going to do it as much and as close to the way we always do it, safely, but with as much of the excitement and all of the spirit of a typical Yom Tov. That's exactly what we have to do and what we've been doing, all of us. I wouldn't even use the word that's enough. It's more than that. It's perfect. And what we're going to hear tonight is about how efforts have been made by very, very special panelists, by Sufrin, by Taylor, by Hillel Abramson, by Dr. Abramson. They're going to bring a perspective in how they have made their Yom Tov and others, how they've made the Yom Tov for others something special, while we are not tempest-tossed on the high seas, but it's a challenging time. They're going to tell us about how they made Yom Tov something very, very special. And that will make our SImchas Beis Hashoeva tonight very special as well. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you.
Good morning, Yashar Rabbi. Thank you for setting the scene very, very much appropriately for this particular sukkahs. And it looks like I'm going to try to promote. Here we are. Our moderator is going to be joining back in. Phil is joining us. There we go, right back in the scene. So maybe a little technical difficulty there. Phil, I see you. Fantastic. Oh, there you go. There you go. Back in person. Thank you so much for everybody joining. I want to just start off by what we're going to be doing in the next segment is a panel. And unfortunately, the moderator doesn't usually get to introduce himself in a way becoming of that. So I want to just take a moment to introduce Phil Rosen, who's going to be serving as moderator this evening. And Phil is a person who excels in whatever he does, whether it be professionally or communally. So whether it be in his capacity and I'm just going to actually just quote to make sure I get it correct, the head of the property group and hospitality and gaming group in the corporate department of Weil, Gotshal and Mangas LLP, one of the greatest law firms in the world. But Phil doesn't just leave his expertise in the office. Phil also goes and takes that beyond into the Jewish community in so many different ways. First, is serving currently as the vice chair of the board of directors of Birthright, which one of the organizations which has one of the most incredible impacts on the Jewish community across the spectrum, and is a member of the board of the trustees of Yeshiva University, a founding and current vice chairman of the board of Yeshiva College, and an active member of a number of organizations, politically active in so many elements, and has been very involved in brokering Israel business and political awareness between Israel, America, and countries beyond that. And I would say that to me, more importantly, is Phil and Malki are friends, and we've had the opportunity of getting to know each other over the last 2 years and just seeing them in action. And also special, we are looking forward to, God willing, Isaac's wedding, B'Shar Tov Mutzlachas. It's coming December, which should be at a wonderful hour. Well, thank you for taking the time, and please take it from here.
Great. So thank you, Rabbi. And thank you, Rabbi Teitelbaum, for setting the stage. I really appreciate it. It's a nice idea that you came up with, Rabbi Trump, and I hope it goes as well as I expect it to. So I'm very lucky to be introducing a dean, a major, and the only rabbi, literally in the history of man, who's played basketball with some of the great ball players of the world, and Phil Rosen, Arye Sufrin. So let me start by introducing the major. Rabbi Major Simon Taylor, born and raised in London. Rabbi Taylor is literally an internationally acclaimed dynamic educator from the UK. He's worked for several teen organizations in the UK, including B'nai Akiva and Aish. And in Aish, he was director of the schools department. He's a star. He's acted as a consultant to the office of the chief rabbi, assisting Chief Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs with his correspondence and a lot of other things. The reason I say he's a major is because his last appointment in the UK was as a British Army chaplain, and he has recently been promoted to major. So those of you who passed through the Young Israel or the other places that Rabbi Taylor appears, please, you can salute him if you'd like. So the rest of his bio is even more impressive. He's a sports enthusiast, and supposedly he's got many sporting awards. He hasn't brought them over to the United States, so they stay in England. He was varsity captain of the school soccer team and a lot of other accomplishments. After a decade of working with teens in the UK, Rabbi Taylor was scouted by NCSY to become regional director for New England. Totally accomplished his job by turning the New England chapter, growing it for 4 consecutive years. And then he stepped away and moved on to a bigger challenge in New York as New York NCSY director. He lives in Cedarhurst with his wife, Leanne, who's our beloved youth director, and 5 lively and sweet children. That's Rabbi Taylor. Moving on to Dr. Abramson. We know him well because he's a resident scholar at the Young Israel of Lawrence-Cedarhurst. And a good number of my friends wake up at 5:30 in the morning so they could attend his classes after the 7:30 minyan. Shout out to Mandy Brecher, who talks about him as a great scholar and how much she enjoys listening to him speak. He's the dean of the Lander College of Arts and Sciences and Machon the Parnassa Institute for Professional Studies in Brooklyn. Is originally from Northern Ontario, and he holds a PhD in history from the University of Toronto and held visiting and postdoctoral appointments at Cornell, Harvard, Oxford, and Hebrew U in Jerusalem. His research in Jewish history has been recognized with fellowships from the National Endowment for the Humanities, the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum, and the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada. He received the Excellence in the Academy Award from the National Education Association. It's not necessarily an Academy Award. Hold on, sorry. It's not necessarily an Academy Award, but it is the Excellence in the Academy Award from the National Education Association. The author of a bunch of books. His current projects include the Jewish History and Daf Yomi podcast on the All Daf app from the Orthodox Union, and the multi-volume History of Jews for Koren Publishers. So that's Dr. Abramson. The last introduction I'm going to make is of my friend Arye Sufrin. Arye originally started in South Florida, and he actually skipped over a slew of his accomplishments, but I'll go back and talk about them. He graduated with honors from Yeshiva University, from the SImchas School of Business. He holds a master's in Jewish Education and Administration from Arye. He served as a Legacy Heritage Fellow at the Yeshiva University Office of School Partnership, and is currently a doctoral student at Arye. Rabbi Sufrin served as assistant rabbi at Beth Jacob, the largest Orthodox shul in California, for 5 years, where he gave weekly shiurim and served as the rabbi of the Young Professionals Minyan that grew to over 120 congregants every Shabbos. He's been a scholar in a bunch of shuls throughout the United States, at the OU West Convention, the NCSY Summer Program. He and his wife Tamar have 5 children, but the part that's missing, he currently serves as head of school at EULA, and he's part of the Orthodox Israel Coalition delegation to the World Zionist Congress. The part that's missing is he's a superb basketball player, and I always love having him on my team when we used to have Sunday games in my house. So that's the part of his resume that doesn't appear in writing. So I'm going to start this off by asking a question of all of the scholars we have here. So starting in March, life has changed, and life changed drastically. Talk to us about how your organization, your school, your institutions that you work with, talk about the biggest changes that went on in your life and in your institution. Start with Dr. Abramson, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rosen, and thank you for that very kind introduction. In many ways, I'm going to make my comments to respond very brief because I'm especially curious to hear from the other panelists. That's primarily because, I have, I think, the easiest challenge of the group. My population are adults. They are, by virtue of the fact that they're in higher education, they have a greater facility with technology. We do not have to be deeply involved with the amorphous social aspect of, Kiddush and of fellowship and things like that happen at shul and at NCSY and in younger educational settings. So we really had less of a challenge. At the same time, we are deeply involved in a mission-driven goal to educate our students for a wide variety of activities, including producing the largest number of graduates in the health sciences field in New York State, for example. So we really got to take this seriously. What we essentially did was we immediately adopted a very collaborative decision-making model using the technology of Zoom to bring in a lot of important stakeholders in the institution. And we had some excellent leadership from Dr. Alan Kadish, who is our president and also a medical doctor who was well aware of the risks of coronavirus. And in fact, I myself was amazed that he was pushing us so fast. And of course, he was always seeing around the corner about what the next kind of news would be regarding the spread of the virus. So with a bold, new collaborative decision-making process, we looked at a lot of the tools that we currently had and we repurposed them. Some, I think, of the most bold moves was, for example, one of the super spreader potential events in college is arena registration, where we bring everyone in to one big location, our main auditorium, and all the professors are there, and all the registrars and financial aid, and of course, hundreds of students, and they have to go meet with faculty and decide their courses and so on. Disastrously impossible under these conditions. So we took our learning management software, which was something called Canvas. It's similar to something called Blackboard, which is essentially kind of like a website designed for professors. And we made it into one massive classroom as if it were the main auditorium. And we put into that classroom all of the things that we would have done physically. And it worked so well that when we did follow-up surveys, the students preferred to do their orientation this way. And in fact, we have replicated it. So hopefully later, when we get to some of our musings on the future, I think that I'd like to return to this idea, because I believe that a lot of the things we find most challenging now will in fact be the source of tremendous bracha and innovation and productivity for our institutions. Another thing we did was we simply ditched all of the ridiculous number of paper forms that you need to behave in a college environment, add drop forms and over tally requests and things like that. And we used Qualtrics, which is a survey software, and just made it think that it was asking people questions about their opinions when it was actually filling out forms for them. And amazingly, we got really good results. And I'm really proud to say that our enrollment actually surged after the virus hit. And I understand that to be a welcome vote of confidence from the community that, we've been around for half a century and we have the resources, intellectual and otherwise, to get it done. But that's in a nutshell, I think, how we've gotten to this sparse. We still have a lot of challenges ahead of us, but I think we've done, thank God, very well.
That's great. Just so you should know, Dr. Kadish was my classmate at Yeshiva University High School. I'm not going to tell you how many years ago it was, but let's put it this way. Our next speaker was in high school way, way, way later than I was. So let me try to figure this out, since I am going in chronological order from speaker to speaker, or age order. Simon and Arye, who's older?
I know Simon definitely looks younger than me. It's I was born in '85, Simon. So you can decide. You don't have to age yourself. I don't live in this community, so I'm okay.
I'm older. I win.
All right, Simon, you're next. Take it away. Where are the awards? I didn't see them. I was focused on the. Oh.
Yeah, I did bring some soccer awards over. You'll be pleased to know.
Good.
But seeing as Dr. Abramson requested it, and I'm not sure that I really belong on this esteemed panel, I thought that perhaps my scroll from the Queen. This is a scroll from the Queen. From when I became a captain. I haven't got my major's one over yet.
Well, I love how you take such good care of that scroll. Like, you framed it and you've got it laminated. No, I'm just joking. All right, you will.
Not yet. Well, when the major one comes, we'll take care of that, Phil. I'm not sure if you'll have space in your office in the city for any more frames. From the last time I went, there wasn't a spare inch.
I don't know. I haven't been there since March 7th, so I have no idea what's there. They could have taken down my entire wall, and the building exists. That I know. I saw it last week. So, Simon, hit it up. Hit it.
Thank you so much, Phil. So it's really great to be speaking to everyone, and it's really interesting that NCSY, I think, is a very different type of organization to the others. And one of the things that sets us apart is that for many years already, NCSY isn't bound to the bricks and mortar, to a building. We really put all of our emphasis into the teenagers, into people, into personalities. And so the whole effects of Corona shutting down physical buildings hasn't necessarily affected NCSY in the same way that it's affected others, but it certainly affected us as well. And one of the pivots that NCSY took, which I think set us up very well for Corona, was really doing everything that we could to help Jewish teenagers connect to their identity, to their Judaism, to our homeland. And so, it all began in Jewish shuls. And then when NCSY realized that teenagers weren't to be found in shuls, they decided, well, this isn't the best plan. Let's try and figure out where the teenagers are. And then they realized, well, the teenagers are in schools, so let's do programs there. And there was youth centers and all sorts of other things. And then until what happened today, which is everyone knows teenagers are to be found primarily online on their phones. And we tried our best to go to schools to reach the teens, work with the families and draw teens into engaging programming in cafes, in coffee shops, pizza stores, and run the most engaging retreats that we can. And I really see it as a big blessing that we have the backing of the OU and thousands of generous donors around the country that enable us not to worry about shul membership and to worry about buildings and anything else other than what is best for these teenagers. And we really get to focus on that. And so during Corona, to pivot into how we're going to adapt is something that we already were doing. So of course, as you all know, schools and shuls adapted to use Zoom, as we are now, as did we. But rather than just use Zoom, we tried to take Zoom to a different level and find innovative ways to use Zoom to engage our teens. One of the programs we created, Escape the Zoom, was so successful that it's been bought by schools around the world to run with their staff and their students. Just last night, RYNJ, a big yeshiva day school in New Jersey, ran a program for their students with our Escape the Zoom program, something that came out of New York NCSY, which we are very proud of. But interestingly, over the summer, that definitely dipped with teens wanting to be out there enjoying the sun. We were worried what was going to happen. And now, interestingly, our numbers have picked right back up on Zoom. As we speak, we've got a big Zoom program happening for teens in Brooklyn. Just today, this afternoon, we had 50 teens from Great Neck North High School in their Jewish Student Union Club on Zoom. And the Zoom numbers are looking very promising again for us, which is very interesting. Something else which we got to focus on during Corona, which we didn't focus on as much before, was teen publications. So right here is the Quarantine Haggadah, which was put together by teens, for teens. It's really incredible. If you didn't get one, let me know. We'll see what we can do about it. And we are about to be finishing the Rosen edition, teen-created Pirkei Avos book, which is really exciting, which is made by teens, for teens, again, a collaboration of teens around the country, which is really fantastic and exciting initiative, which, again, we probably wouldn't have done if it wasn't for these conditions. Another really fantastic opportunity was to tell the teens that, you know what, when it comes to a crisis, you have to step up, you have to pitch in, you have to get involved and help how you can. And so as soon as the summer began, we started finding different chesed opportunities, different ways we could mobilize our teenagers to help the community. And amazingly, from zero, we had almost 4,000 teenagers around the country involved in different types of chesed projects to help the community. And it was really remarkable. It was remarkable, from helping the elderly, from helping distribute food, to right here in the 5 towns, painting the skate park in Far Rockaway, to all sorts of interesting projects, rebuilding a house in Long Beach that was still not being rebuilt from Sandy. And many of these chesed projects are carrying on. Just today, I got emails about local farms that want our help to provide vegetables and fruits to families that can't afford it. And so there's so many opportunities for the teens to get involved and give back in Chesed, and that's been something very exciting that's come out of this crisis. Finally, there's been a talk over the years that we focus too much on the teens and not the family unit as a whole. And so we already slowly started to think more about the family. We hired an incredible staff member, Nechama Kamelhar, who just focuses on family engagement and the adults. And during these times, the teens are at home for more time than ever with their families. And so we've been creating programming and publications for families to use together. Right here's an example. We made for Rosh Hashanah boxes where we gave out this amazing new mini family machzor that we created. And every month we're now delivering to families all across the country, educational packets with calendars and books and games and Jewish educational content for the family to use together. And Baruch Hashem, those programs and that content has been going down better than we ever expected. And one of the outcomes of that was before Sukkot, we decided, wouldn't it be great if we use our teenagers to build a sukkah for some families that have never had a sukkah before. And one sukkah turned into 4 sukkahs. And then we discovered that there's an incredible Jew in Westchester by Amazing Hashgacha that wants to, it's his thing to donate sukkahs to families that have never had a sukkah before. And Baruch Hashem, we were able to provide 15 sukkahs this year to families in Long Island that have never had a sukkah before. The feedback they've been telling us each day of how they've been eating in the sukkah, inviting friends that have never had a sukkah before, is really remarkable and inspiring. And please God, we're hoping next year to grow this program to have hundreds and hundreds of new sukkahs all around the country as a result. So, I think that those are just a few small examples. Phil, thank you for everything that you do, because we left off your resume that you're very involved in NCSY and a big supporter of ours, and helping us really with many of these initiatives. And we'll go to the next panelist.
Thank you. So before we go to the next panelist, I have to apologize, Chatasi, because I was supposed to let all of the panelists give a 4-minute introductory remark. And so I apologize to Dr. Abramson and to Simon that I didn't do that. Excuse me. But I wanted to make one point on my own. There are 2 parts of my life. There's the working part, which to me includes both my job and the organizations that I'm involved with. But there's also, as it is for all of us, there's a family part. One of the great things about this era, I call it the era of Corona, since March, and I know there's been so much tragedy and so much bad that this disease has contributed to our society. I've lost a friend, and I've lost some people I was very close to over the past bunch of months. There are redeeming factors that obviously don't rise to the level of the loss, but having my 8 family members in my house was a redeeming positive part of this environment, and I'm sure that's true for a lot of people. The dinner table at 6:30 or 7 o'clock at night, which was part of my life growing up. I grew up in Great Neck, so it's good that you're doing a Great Neck North program, Simon, right now. But when I was there, my father came home from the train, walked in to the house, and we sat down at the dinner table, all of us together. In my life as an adult, I've never had that, not when I lived in the city and not when I live out here. It's just never been part of my life, and this is something special. I do feel like I'm a character in Leave It to Beaver the Brady Bunch, but it's not so bad. It's not so bad at all. So that to me is an interesting part of life. I'm going to turn to my favorite teammate at basketball, the head of school at EULA, and my friend Arye Sufrin.
Thank you very much, Phil. Bershus, Rabbi Teitelbaum, and Rabbi Trump, and everyone on the panel. Phil, you're a good friend. You're a mentor of mine. You've given me a lot of sage advice over the years, so it's an honor to be here. I don't know. I'll share with the public. When I was negotiating my head of school contract, I went to Phil to be to review it. I came back to my board president with about 25 comments, and he looked at me like I was crazy. And he said, "Who's your lawyer?" And I said, "Phil Rosen." And he knows who Phil Rosen is. And he says, "Does Phil Rosen know I'm on the other side of the deal?" And he said, "Yes." And that's why he offered to do it for free. So so thank you, Phil. I have a lot of personal hakaras hatov to you and your entire family. At EULA, things are a little bit different in Los Angeles than it is in New York. Jen, I experienced it just by this week. It always was, right, exactly. But I really experienced it this week, davening at Young Israel of Lawrence, which does I just want to say, an outstanding job as far as social distancing and regulation is concerned. I've become a little bit of my own mumche and having to study it for my own school. So I just want to really compliment the lay leadership and the rabbanim of the community for doing a phenomenal job. But in Los Angeles, our governor, I know there's a lot of opinions on the governor in New York, but our governor in California actually has not opened up schools. So we've not been in school since March of last school year. And we've actually not been inside shuls. Shuls are allowed, prayer is allowed for all faiths, outdoors, socially distanced with masks on. So I've actually not even walked inside a shul, and I'm not even sure. It's probably been 6 or 7 months. So it's very different on the West Coast, as it always is, but even more so now. At EULA, we recently, by Hashgacha, built a state-of-the-art campus about 1.5 years ago. It's a magnificent campus. We've had the schus to have Rabbi Trump speak in our Beis Medrash on our campus. And it really is a special, unique campus. And it's spaced out. It features many STEAM labs. We feel that we're leaders for Jewish high schools across the country in entrepreneurship, STEAM, and robotics and engineering. It has a beautiful fitness and gym and student support collaboration rooms. So in our mind, we always felt like we had this space. We're also a one-to-one laptop program for many years. So we felt like we had the technology and we've invested heavily in the technology. Our teachers have had the training. So we actually felt pretty comfortable with the transition from, educationally. Our big concern was, how do you maintain the neshama of the school? Right, because that's the essence of the school, and being a yeshiva high school is more than just academic achievement. Academic achievement is vital for our students so they can move on to the next stage of their life without question. But there's a special. You walk onto the campus of EULA, and there's this special atmosphere. There's something special in the air, and you feel it. Being in EULA, Moshe Weinberger, when he came to EULA, he loved it so much. He just sat there. He's like, I just want to sit here. He sat outdoors and brought him a car. And he just sat there, just like it's special. The weather helps, obviously, but nonetheless, and that's what we were really concerned about. We want to make sure we understand that schools are being shut down, and we understand that there's a lot of differences of opinions. Person A thinks it's politics, and person B thinks it's this, and person C thinks it's that. And to me, it was irrelevant. We were going to follow the law, and whatever the governor said, and whatever the law was, that is what we were going to do. So how do we do this? And I give credit to my lay leadership, my board, my medical task force for their guidance, because it wasn't something I would have been able to pull off by myself. And I recognize Dr. Mark Hyman is here in the crowd, so I want to give him a karsa tov. So how do you stay true to the essence and the neshama of this school? And it really came down to a beautiful idea that I heard about Avram Avinu, where the pasuk tells us, Avram zaken ba bayamim. Avram, he was old, and ba bayamim was coming to the end of the days, and then it says Hashem berach es Avraham bakol, and Hakadosh Baruch Hu gave Avram a blessing bakol with everything, and the famous question on the pasuk is why does it say zaken and ba bayamim? It seems a little bit redundant. And why does it repeat Abraham's name? And I heard a beautiful answer. They call him the Yenuka, or Shlomo Yehuda. He's a tremendous Talmid Chacham in Eretz Yisrael. He fills up 100. But when he gives a shir, hundreds and thousands of people will go hear him speak. And he explains that the reason why it repeats Avram, and the reason why it says Zaken B'Vayam is because Avram was special because he lived a really challenging life. He grew up in Terach's home, and he was thrown in the fire by Nimrod. He traveled in his 70s from Haran. He wasn't even sure where he was going at the time. There were famines. His wife was kidnapped. The Plishtim gave him trouble. The story of Yishmael, the story of the Haggadah. He hit challenges. Avram Avinu hit challenges at every corner he turned. And the reason why he got the bracha of Bakol is because he always stayed true to who he was, Avraham. Avraham zakim b'bayam Hashem berach. It says es Avraham. Why did he get that bracha? Because he was always Avram Avinu. He never ever changed his commitment or altered what he was supposed to do. His achnasas orchim was always at top notch. His commitment to the Ribono Shalom was always there. No matter what challenge he faced, he was there. No matter how old he was, zakim b'bayamim, every day that came, he was still Avram Avinu. So I looked at my administration and I said, the governor says we can't do anything, and we're talking about people's lives at stake. So of course we're going to follow the law. But how are we going to stay true to you? How are we going to be true to who we were? So the theme that we came up with as administration is that we're not going to dwell on everything that we can no longer do, because that's just going to be depressing and devastating. But we need to start focusing and doubling down on things that we can do. And that became the theme of everything we did. So for example, those 11 weeks from March to May, we created 35 programs in 11 weeks that we never to come up with 35 programs. I mean, it's over 3 programs a week, which is if you ever ran a school, just complete insanity to just put together on the fly week by week. And we recognize that, so the first question is, how can our students make an impact on everything going on in the world? And we capitalized on our STEAM labs and our technology that we had, and our students, along with our director of entrepreneurship and STEAM at ULA, Michael Cohen, rolled out Operation Face Shield, where they literally designed and created masks when there was a time where there was a shortage of masks, and they created masks for hospitals, for nurses, for doctors that were pre-approved by Cedars-Sinai and UCLA Medical Center. And we didn't have the ability to create thousands, but the hundreds that they came up with just was absolutely incredible. We hosted multiple blood drives. We have an 11,000 square foot basketball gymnasium, multi-purpose center. We hosted multiple blood drives for the American Blood Cross and for different Jewish organizations. Our students put together different programs to get sponsorship so they could deliver food to the nurses in the ER. Remember, this was also at a time where we weren't sure if there were going to be enough beds in the hospital. So it was a really stressful time, and we turned our students into, to become active doers. And we even partnered with NCSY, Rabbi Taylor, showing support to the LAPD. With our students felt strongly to make a statement against defunding police. I know this is not meant to be a political conversation, and they delivered packages to LAPD and sent notes and sent cards, and we really want to turn them into leaders during this time of crisis, and not have to be able to remember this time where they just sat around in fear, but they were able to they were able to make a difference. We also recognized that, the only time our students can hear from special speakers is when they're in town. LA is not like New York, where you have just incredible Rabbanim and Talmidei Chachamim that are, we just don't have as many. And we used the opportunity for Zoom to be able to expose our students to speakers that they normally would not be able to see. And both religious, Jewish and non-Jewish. For example, our students heard from Stan Kasten, who is the owner of the Los Angeles Dodgers. That can only happen because of Zoom, in LA there was a big crisis, a cheating scandal in baseball with the Houston Astros at the time. And they got to hear from him and to hear about ethics. They heard from NBA players when the NBA COVID shut down and the whole world felt like it was stopping at the time. But then they also heard from Rabbanim that they would normally not hear from. Rabbi Arye Leibowitz, Rabbi Kamenetsky from DRS, or Shai Shechter, multiple Rosh Yeshivas from Yeshiva University, a weekly Q&As with Rabbi Jason Weiner, who's one of the leading Rabbanim in the community at Cedar Sinai, has been a leader with COVID. And we focus on what can we give our students that they normally wouldn't have, and they would normally not get these opportunities. And lastly, one thing that was allowed, and this was controversial at first. It sounds crazy that it was controversial. But davening, outdoor shuls was allowed, but school was not allowed. So we took what we felt was a bold move, and we made minyan mandatory. Which means you have to come to school at 8 o'clock to daven outdoors, socially distanced. And then you have to leave at 8:45 to get back to be on shiur from 9:30 and school the rest of the day. And the reason why I was so adamant about it this year was because I saw something fascinating that took place last year when we went on Zoom and everyone was at home. And, high school boys, I love them. I was once a high school boy myself, but even the most motivated, they're extremely lazy. And if you tell them that, you have school at home, they're going to be in bed with their computer. And no matter how academic they are, they will take notes and they will study. We weren't worried about the academic piece as much because we felt prepared. But we had our kids in bed. We were learning how to create proper decorum for learning. Remote distancing in learning. They were in their pajamas. You could smell their breath through the computer screen. As far as that's concerned. And the argument I made to my parent body was, we're going to start this school year, and we need to make minyan mandatory. And it's not even about the ruchnius, although it obviously is about the ruchnius, because davening with the minyan is incredible chinuch, and it's incredibly important. But these boys need to get up. They need to leave their homes. They need to get dressed. They need to go somewhere that's meaningful. They need to see their rebbeim in person. They need to see their friends. They need to hear a dvar halacha. And then they need to walk home. And if you can't drive them because it's too much of a nuisance, 8 to 8:45, I totally get it. You get them a bike, you put a helmet on them, and they get to school. The weather in Los Angeles is beautiful. There's no excuses. And we take attendance. And if you missed out, you're getting a call home. And there was a lot of pushback. 3 days into it, parents and everyone agrees it was the most incredible thing. And this is not data driven. This is my own perception. I actually feel like davening has been better. High school teenagers feel it can be difficult. I don't think it's a EULA issue. I think it's a bigger discussion for the next panel, Rabbi Trump. Tefillah amongst teenagers, high school students. And I think the reason why we all feel davening has been better, and I think the reason davening has been better is because maybe for the first time these boys are waking up to go every day to do something specific, and that's to go to minyan. They're not just going to school, where minyan was a part of school, where shiur was a part of school. They're waking up and they're going to minyan, and they're bringing their tefillin and they're coming. It's a 45-minute, 50-minute experience, and they're coming for one reason and one reason only. And davening has been incredible. The attention span is there, the kavanah, and it's not everyone, but it's just a different experience when it comes to davening, which is something that has been fascinating. Something else that we did was we capitalized on our STEAM program. And we started something called the Haggadah Innovation Challenge, where we're really promoting this concept of entrepreneurship. And we had students really create different scalable business ideas. And they would identify opportunities, applicable markets. They would craft compelling and engaging pitches. And we actually created a mini Shark Tank, which was open to the community. And 2 projects were actually funded, and they're actually going to the next stage. So our focus was on what you can do, as opposed to dwelling on the things that we can't do. And focusing on the neshama of the school. Our Rabbi have done a phenomenal job visiting Talmidim, deliveries, cholents, packages. Our Rabbi call our students every week, and we and our communication with our Talmidim parents has been in overdrive, and that's also been something very special. We've done everything, programs from Zoom zitzes to concerts with Eitan Katz and Simcha Leiner, and just focusing on the what you cans and not the what you can'ts.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you so much. No wonder you're an inspiration for all the kids at EULA, and I knew it way back when. So I just want to add one item, and then we'll turn to the next topic. And I know this is so fascinating. One of my Rebbeim that I turn to for advice in Israel is a fellow named Avramson Kluger in Ramat Beit Shemesh. When I was talking to him about what's going on today, what COVID has changed in our society and how difficult it is, he said one of the, if you can say it, positives of the COVID era is, he said that people are able to start focusing on themselves from a spiritual viewpoint. He said, Hashem wants everybody to look in the mirror every day and say to themselves that Hashem cares about me, Hashem loves me because I'm me, not because of anything I do, just because I'm me. And what this era has allowed people from all ages to do is to think about that, to get focused on the fact that they don't need to do anything special, but they need to just be themselves, and they need to figure out how that creates an environment in which God loves you and continues to. So I think what you've done, Rabbi Sufrin, with your kids at EULA is phenomenal, because what you've taught them is exactly that, and that's something very special. So I'm going to turn to the next topic, and I'll go in the same order if you don't mind. What element of pre-pandemic practice will no longer be with us? What element of pre-pandemic world is something that we should say goodbye, don't come back, please stay away, and good riddance, to use Dr. Abramson's words. You know what, with this, I think maybe we'll ask Rabbi Trump to step in and say a few words, both on the first question and the second question. I know you're the host rather than one of the panelists, but you have so much to bring to the table, Rabbi Trump, that we'd love to hear from you.
Sure, thanks, Will. It's a pleasure. It's so inspirational. By the way, it's so nice to be under the same tent, because I'm just realizing part of the reason why we're all here is really all under the same tent. Rabbi Sufrin is a proud son-in-law of the Leichtons, who's here for Yom Tov, and Dr. Abronson's our resident scholar. Phil, you're a proud member, or Taylor, a proud member, and your wife is the youth director. So nice that this is all internal. We're not sailing outwards to find this incredible talent. Just one thing I just wanted to respond to that question is not maybe what we leave behind, but what we take with us is that how many people have stayed at home for Yom Tov or for Tisha B'Av because they couldn't get out before, and we never thought about them. We just we all thought that shul was about being in shul, and suddenly we realized there were a lot of people who actually were at home for whatever reason. They couldn't get out. And we're now serving that audience. We're serving that crowd. And like small things like the fact that in future, any program, let's say a Tisha B'Av program, which is during the weekday, will be Zoomed. That is an incredible innovation, which should be obvious. But there are people who can't get to shul on Tisha B'Av on a regular year. Forget Corona. Similarly, like we've created stay-at-home guides for people who can't get to shul. That's true in Corona, but that's also going to be true in the future as well. Somehow, to a certain degree, we thought and imagined our shul to be something which was bricks and mortar, and it's much, much more than that. And so I think that the notion of our institutions being this diras keva is perhaps what I'm trying to think of leaving behind, in the sense that the expense and the identity of the shul, like Rabbi Sufrin was saying beforehand, the neshama of it is much broader and is much more encompassing. Even when we have regular return, God willing, we're looking forward to including all the many people who are beyond that tent for whatever reason as well. I'm so one proud moment I had was I was chatting with somebody, and they were talking about a particular backyard minyan that went on in Woodsburg. And they would and they were describing how it went, and they said, it was so great. We're using the shul guidelines, everything was great. And I'm like, there you go. Even the shul's guidelines, the word for word, all the blood, sweat, and tears, which is great. I'm just saying the shul has its marks, has its impact, and continues to have it on the community at large. So that's just one thing which I was thinking about. Thank you for the opportunity, Sean.
So I'm gonna say one more add-on, and then I'll turn to Dr. Abramson. So I am the one of the heads of Birthright, which is probably the organization that has had the most dramatic impact on the Jewish world by bringing 750,000 young Jewish people back to Judaism and back to a world where they associate with the state of Israel. And it's unbelievable. I go all over and I meet Birthright graduates, and everyone has the same, it's almost like it was rehearsed. It's almost the same line, which is Birthright changed my life. We have not had a trip since February. And for the donors, for the people involved in the organization, it is literally traumatic. And for the kids, there were 50,000 kids scheduled to go this year in 2020 to Israel to have their lives changed. And it's traumatic for me and the other leadership that we can't do that, and we have not. Now we have a wait list of something like 75,000 for next year because people are signing up, desperately wanting to go on a trip, desperately wanting to get to Israel. Please God, we should have a vaccine, and we should have some ability to send them there. I think that the interesting part about it is that the demand of kids and young adults wanting to go to Israel and wanting to come back to Judaism, or as Shlomo Carlebach used to say, for the Pintel Yid to come out, is pretty dramatic. And so, I think that's going to be a very big post-pandemic part of the world, please God. So let me turn to Dr. Abramson and love to hear from you the answer to what practices and what elements of our world will we say good riddance to and never to come back again.
Thank you very much. I want to also especially thank you for reminding me how valuable it is to have dinner with my family again. That's something that, especially with New York work ethic, it's very hard to manage. So even though I love the Long Island Railroad, I have a feeling that's one of the things that I really will be happy to say goodbye to is, less commuting. But if I can take a just a little bit larger view for a couple of minutes, I've been so inspired listening to the tremendously bold innovation and new thinking that is, liberating a lot of the experiences that various Jewish institutions have had during this horrible plague. And I want to suggest that, we're actually living in a pivotal moment, a cusp moment of phenomenal change. I mean, I think it was Rabbi Yisrael Solander says that if you can repeat something 21 times, then it becomes a new habit, right? You can change a midah with 21 repetitions. So we have had considerably more than 21 days of this pandemic, and halavai should be over soon, but we are actually preparing ourselves to emerge into a new post-pandemic reality, specifically in the area of Jewish education. And as a historian, I've never been called upon more often to say something about the history of these kind of traumatic technological, watersheds in time. I skipped all those classes in graduate school in the philosophy department. They were often in the divinity school, which is on the other side of campus. So I'm used to looking backwards. But when we look backwards, we can note two really similar periods in Jewish history in which we were confronted with a new technology which had a lot of obvious utility, but was widely panned by everyone who used it. I'm thinking specifically about the widespread use of manuscript writing in the ancient world, specifically a very particular machlokas or argument over the codification of oral Torah. And if you look at the ancients, and this is something that was true of the Greeks as well, they felt that writing things down would cheapen the entire educational enterprise. Plato, for example, records Socrates saying, you cannot ask manuscripts questions. If you read a book and then you have a question, ask the book a question, it's going to say the same words over and over again to you. So we're saying, why are we relying on books so much? It will, in fact, diminish our mental capacity because we won't have that intimate learning with a present teacher. Similarly, about 1,600 years later, a little bit 2,100 years later, you get to the advent of cheap print technology as opposed to handwritten manuscript technology. And many civilizations felt that the poor quality early 16th century print was so ugly when compared to beautiful handmade calligraphy that it was like, you were diminishing the quality of the objet d'art that we call a manuscript. In fact, one of the early printers who made his living from printing, but nevertheless disparaging, a man named Hieronymus Squarciafico, he wrote that the abundance of books makes people less studious. It destroys the memory and enfeebles the mind by relieving it of too much work. Meaning, why learn anything when you can pull it off a shelf and look it up? Or today, you can just pull out your phone and there's more shas in here than there is in here. There's a tremendous amount of knowledge at our fingertips that totally changes the way in which we interact with information. So we're at that kind of moment right now. And I believe that when we look back at the pandemic, when it's in our rearview mirror, our grandchildren will ask us, Zaidi, they won't say, what was it like during the pandemic? They will say, what was it like before the pandemic? When classes were limited to only those people who could physically get to the room. Major Rabbi Taylor said earlier, all of a sudden we're realizing that instead of pulling people into one physical space with all the concomitant difficulties and the cost-benefit ratio involved, we're finding at Turo that, oh my gosh, students, our catchment area has expanded because using this technology, if we can use it well, and it is a very mature technology ready for us, we can actually bring more people into the tent. And so I'm not sure how to translate this kind of value to organizations that specialize in things other than higher education, like the spiritual activity of a synagogue or the camaraderie that happens in a school or in a youth organization. But certainly the value that we get in access, in bringing more people in, is phenomenal and has tremendous potential. And we have to really put our best energies into thinking about how to capitalize on this technology to increase the reach of our institutions and to deliver the value of our tradition to a bold new post-pandemic audience.
Simon, I'm going to turn to you and ask you, and thank you very much, Dr. Abramson. I really appreciate that. That was terrific. Simon, what are we losing that used to be a practice in the pre-pandemic world?
I think that the main thing that we're losing is, NCSY is famous for the incredible atmosphere that's created, from Shabbatons to summer programs to retreats. And however great Zoom is, and I'm following right now my Zoom programs that like Dr. Abram said, that they're huge and that they're going very strong, which is wonderful. But on the other hand, that experience that we create in person, without the masks, without the social distancing, there's no substitute for it. And that's the same on a birthright trip, an NCSY trip, a Eula Shabbaton. It doesn't matter. There's no way that we can make up for that. There are plenty of other fantastic things we can do, which are also incredible and have value in their own rights. But those life-changing in-person experiences that happened, for over 65 years, and NCSY Shabbatons and summer trips and retreats, which to me are the most impactful, life-changing moments that a person has. Unless we get back to those, we're definitely losing those. But I think that right now we're pretty hopeful that it won't be too long till there's a vaccine, and we will be able to recreate those moments.
Thank you. Terrific. Arye, what's missing? And good riddance.
Well, as far as good riddance, in 1953 there was a famous person by the name of John Cage in the music industry, and he came out with a brilliant song. I don't know if you ever heard about it. It was called 433, and in this song, it was 1953, so you actually had to get a record player and put the record on there, and do the whole thing. And so it wasn't just like today where you just press play on your phone on Spotify. So you go through this whole hock to get this song on and it's called 433, and for 4 minutes and 33 seconds you press play, and it was complete silence. The song was 4 minutes and 33 seconds of silence. You fast forward to the 1990s, and there was another singer by the name of Michael Batt, I believe, and he came out with a song on his track, on his CD. One of the songs on his CD was 60 seconds of silence. And John Cage's trust found out about this song, and they sued him for stealing John Cage's 4 minutes and 33 seconds of silence. He took him to court for silence, right? And they actually settled it out of court for a 6-figure sum. Now, Michael Batt was pretty upset about it because he felt he accomplished in 60 seconds what John Cage tried to accomplish in 4 minutes and 33 seconds. And he felt it was an entirely different song. But at the end of the day, he settled it for the respect of the music industry. And if you think about it, the whole story seems preposterous, at least to me, that you pay a 6-figure sum to play nothing. But I think the Musar Haskel there is that silence, what John Cage was trying to say is that silence, when used correctly for introspection and reflection, or even meditation, right? In Hasidus, we call it hispodidus, can be music in and of itself. Because when we can eliminate the distractions and actually be true to who we are, and not only focus on the hustle and bustle of life, then all of a sudden we can be true to who we are as people. So Phil, you talk about sitting, having dinner with your family and not allowing the distractions to get in the way. that to me is the good riddance of this era, getting rid of all that noise that keeps us away from the dinner table with our own children. And I'm guilty of it. And sometimes even though I do not have a fantasy football team, but it could be as silly as a fantasy football team, not talking to your kids over a fantasy football team. Or it could be as important as a business deal. That what I at least have learned is it can wait 30 minutes, right? There are times where there are emergencies, but most of our emergencies are not really emergencies. The only emergencies we have is that our children need us, that our family needs us, that our wives need us, that our parents need us, and the list goes on. And we need to be able to model this. We need to be able to say good riddance to all of those things that were just not that important, but are really more mundane, that we made so important in our lives. That's number one. I think number two, where we could say good riddance, and maybe, I mean, Rabbi Trump would have to speak about this from a shul perspective, but I felt it a little when I was at Beth Jacob, but definitely in the school perspective, you feel it. There's a lot of competition. And at the end of the day, we're, as a yeshiva high school, the school down the block or the school, in the valley or the school across the country, we're in it for the same goal, and that's to educate the future leaders of the Jewish people. And whether student X goes to your school or student Y goes to the other school, okay, everyone wants, there's that competition. But because of that competition, it got in the way of what was much needed collaboration, and was much needed communication, and was much needed teamwork. And at least in Los Angeles, the collaboration amongst the schools has been incredible going through this pandemic. And we have to say good riddance to the just unnecessary competition or resentment that would be created by just such silly things. And by the way, by doing so, I think the students would benefit most, because they would see a certain modeling of midot that I think is just important for all of us to display. But additionally, I think financially, it would be beneficial to our community. And what do I mean by that? We always speak about the tuition crisis, affordability. And many institutions focus on solving this crisis by building their endowment, which they should. At EULA, we are building an endowment, and we're making great progress on it. And while that makes a lot of sense, that also takes a lot of time. So the real question is, how can you cut costs without compromising the quality of the educational program that we all expect for our children, right? What we don't want to do is pay $5,000 a year of tuition and give them a below average education. We expect our students to get a world-class education, a world-class experience, an incredible relationship with the Rabbi, and and the list goes on. But that costs money. It's expensive. And then what happens is you have 65% of your parent body, at least at EULA Boys High School, who can't afford to pay full tuition. And then the school has to raise $3 million to have to pay it. And you get to a point where it's just not sustainable. So if there was more collaboration, and we say good riddance to that competitive edge, why can't, EULA Boys High School, and I'll just use DRS because it's a local high school in the 5 towns, or Rambam, or Hafter, and look at each other and say, hey, Rabbi Kamenetsky, I have an amazing AP physics teacher. And we both know how hard it is to get an AP physics teacher. That's a difficult teacher to find. Or Touro College, right? Dean Abramson comes and says, I have someone who can teach chem, AP Chem. And why can't we bring those schools together? And all of a sudden, you have a class online. And I think virtual learning is not going away. There will be a component of virtual learning, at least that we will always stick to. I have students now in Miami, Los Angeles, Las Vegas, Israel, Palm Springs, San Diego, and I think that's it, but all over the country because of this pandemic. Why can't we share resources? Why can't we share faculty now? Why can't a Touro professor teach a course at EULA Boys High School? And why can't a EULA, we have an outstanding Talmud Chacham Rabbi Sarah, why can't he give a shiur now at Lander College? And by doing so, we can all save save on the expense side, right? Which lowers, which will lower the cost that we pass on to the parents. But more importantly, we're lowering costs, but we're giving our students an even better education. And usually better is tied to more money. And here's a unique opportunity where we could lower costs, be more efficient in utilizing our resources now that we all are comfortable with these technologies, and we can give our students the world-class education they need and not compromise, the in-person experiences that Rabbi Taylor so beautifully spoke about, because those Shabbatonim are vital and are crucial. And those, and sitting at your Rebbe's home, you can't replace sitting at your Rebbe's home on a Friday night with anything. Being there on a Friday night, seeing, it's not just about being the Rebbe, having the students sit at the Shabbos table and see the way a family functions and operates, and seeing Zmiros and sees a Rebbitzin and an Eishes Chayil. I mean, these are real chinuch opportunities. So for me, Phil, I say good riddance to the distractions and embracing the silence of John Cage and Michael Batt. And I say good riddance to the unnecessary competitive resentment, and start promoting more collaboration, which will lower costs for our families in the community.
Terrific. Before I get to my last question, I just want to point out to all of you a couple of other positives that have come that are not Zoom related, but are certainly positives that have come out of this crisis. So I'm a very big believer in face-to-face discussion, face-to-face meetings with my clients, with people that I do business with my partners, my associates. So what I've done over the last few months is I've made an effort to create the face-to-face, even though I'm not in Manhattan, where I usually meet up with people in my office, in restaurants, in meeting rooms. I make an effort to go out to houses. So a couple of weeks ago, I went twice to Baltimore to visit with a client. Once was in his backyard and once was in a cafe right near his house. Since people aren't moving, I'm making the effort to move, but in a very restricted way. So it's just the two of us and we're facing each other, but we're 6 feet away and we're either wearing masks or if it's outside, just being distant and careful. I'm still a believer. Arye, you and I always give hugs to each other, and Simon and Rabbi Trump, and we always hug each other. That's not going to happen for a while, but the part of the equation of seeing each other and talking face to face has to continue, and people have to make the effort to do that. Maybe that's something that will come out of this. People will realize how important it is to see people. Many of my friends are starved for face-to-face contact. They're dying that they don't have anything. They don't have any contact with some people they're used to seeing every day or every couple of days. So that's a part of the equation that's, I think, is going to be a focus in the future. What I'd like to do is I'd like to ask each of you a very broad question, and then, give me your best answer. I'm not going to say 4 minutes or less, which was supposed to have been the introductory remarks, which I missed. But I'm going to ask you to very shortly, in the best concise form, tell me your projection for the future. Are you optimistic? Are you pessimistic? Do you think that we're going to come out of this a better community than we were before? And are we going to learn from what we went through the last 7 months? I'm going to start with the youngest, Arye. Since you spoke last, I'm going to go to you, and then Simon, and then end with Dr. Abramson.
Okay, thank you, Phil. I'm an optimistic person, so I'm going to play devil's advocate with myself. and share what I could be a little bit pessimistic about and with some optimism. You know, in Los Angeles, as I said, we are still davening outdoors, where many of us are in backyards, myself included. Just we don't have the space a young Israel Lawrence has, a parking lot. It's just not the way it works in Los Angeles. We're spread out throughout the community, and some people, there are benefits, as Rabbi Trump mentioned, to that. But I find that many are enjoying the smaller segments a bit too much, at least in LA. And unfortunately, the conversations are now about how quick was your davening on Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur. The conversations are about the fact that there's no drushas. The conversation about that there's no singing. We didn't sing through Hallel, or we didn't have to do Hoshanos, or how short Hakafos is going to be this year. And we're starting to, I'm concerned we're starting to lose appreciation and understanding of the importance and the value of Berov Am Hadras Melech. You know, in Hakel, the mitzvah of Hakel, the whole purpose of Hakel is that everyone has to come, right? The women, the men, the women, the children, everyone has to come. And there's no, I mean, I wasn't there, but I assume there's no daycare, there's no childcare, right? There's no kids groups at Hakel. They all have to be there, and they all have to hear the Torah reading. And it's probably just, I mean, we can barely get by, you know, a shachar with 100 people if there's 6 kids in the room. I mean, how did Hakel operate? And I think the idea there is that what really matters is that we wanted the kids to see that experience. The experience of Berov Am Hadras Melech. That Judaism is more than just a minyan. It's more than just a shir. It's a transformative experience. And you need to see that in numbers. It's why we brought students to the SImchas at MetLife Stadium. We took a trip to the East Coast. We actually davened minyan at Young Israel. But Trump arranged for us to be allowed to daven in minyan. So thank you. But it's because when you have a moment where you can create that, you can't miss those experiences. So I'm pessimistic that community members, at least on the West Coast, are feeling that way. But I'm optimistic that our rabbanim and our leadership will be able to figure out the right way when we are able to return to our shuls and the mikdash ma'at that we so desperately need, that they'll be able to do in a way that will be so exciting, that will create that experience, that you'll have no choice but to come back to shul, because you realize that down in the backyard is based on circumstance and not because that's what's great. The other part that I'm nervous about, and this is a real concern, is that our children are missing out on a critical time in their life right now. Right? Schools are more than academic learning institutions. You know, it's about the whole child, and the social emotional that cannot be accessed online and needs to be in person. You're talking about face-to-face, Phil. Missing out with them is going to hurt them down the road. To what extent? I'm just not bright enough. I'm just not smart enough to tell you. But it will. And even though, I always tell my Rabbi and teachers, EULA is not an online school. We just happen to be teaching online right now. And because of that, we have to, triple down our efforts on stopping by your student's front doorstep to see him, to give him just to get, to say hello, to wish him a good Shabbos. Or when you see him on the street, it needs to be the biggest smile that they could see is happening behind the mask, because we're not an online school. We just happen to be teaching online. And schools play, the research is there. Just read any academic article about a role of a school in a child's life, and they play a critical role in supporting the whole child, not just their academic achievement. It's in addition to structure of learning, schools provide a stable and secure environment. They offer developing social skills and peer relationships. Social interaction, those small conversations in the halls are so crucial to their development and to their growth as they grow up, their interpersonal skills. And at the extended school closures is harmful to the kids. And I understand why they're closed. I understand there's a different health concern, but this is harmful to the kids. And it will lead to severe learning loss and the need for that in-person experience is particularly important. I truly believe for the teenagers, and it's going to take a toll, and therefore we're going to need to invest more into their social emotional experience. It's not enough for a school to have one, social worker. You check the box. I have a social worker in my school for 400 kids. Kol hakavod yasher kol. It's just not enough. We have to be makbid to have, to invest into educational programming for our kids, to the resources that focus specifically on the social emotional. And this is why at Eula we were so makbid on the daily outdoor minyan, on night enrichment programming, because to give a semblance of normalcy. Just like the business world weighs financial aspects, when they make a decision, we have to weigh the social emotional pieces when we're talking about our most prized possessions, our children, the future leaders. What am I optimistic about? I'm optimistic about the resilience of our community. You see how much we've done, not just Eula. Look at Young Israel, look at NCSY, look at Turo, Yeshiva University. Look at the programming that came out of Hakotel with all the Roshei Yeshivas from every single, hashkafa under the sun, to have a Rav Asher Weiss with a Rav Herschel Schachter with Roshei Yeshivas from the Mir to Roshei Yeshivas from Gush. We are resilient. Klal Yisrael has always been resilient. Klal Yisrael has been, you go back to, the both the first and the second base in Mikdash, the Mitzrayim, go even further back, go to Amalek and, go to Amalek in the Midbar, the Crusades, the Shoah. We are a resilient nation, and knowing that and seeing it in action is incredibly inspiring for me. And it's what gives me the courage to be able to wake up every morning and say, how are we going to make sure that we're moving forward and we're not remaining complacent? And that's what we're about. Adam Harishon was named Adam, and I'll end with this thought. He was the first person in all of society. It's a little bit of a weird name. Adam comes from the word Adama, which means ground. It's the first person in the world. You would think like his name would be a little bit more chashuv. It had a little bit more prominence, it would be more of royalty, right? And he was named after the ground, Adam. And why? And there's a lot of beautiful answers, but one answer that really resonates with me is that, in the ground you have soil, and within the ground you could find a lot of different resources that benefit the world by digging, based on where you are in the world. You could find diamonds. You could have seeds that could give you beautiful apple trees and can give you fruits and sustenance. You could have trees that give you oxygen so we can breathe in the world. All you have to do is tap into the soil and make sure that you create the right environment, and that person blossoms and makes an impact on the world. We all come from Adam Harishon, and we all come from that soil of potential. And we just have to be resilient to keep watering and our children, the future, our community members, to believe in that potential, because there will be a post-pandemic. And I liked what you said, Dr. Abramson. It's not during, it's before I thought that was so beautiful. There will be a post-pandemic, and Klal Yisrael will be stronger. The way we have more Batei Midrashim than we did pre-World War II, Klal Yisrael will be stronger, will be more unified, and Eretz Hashem, we will all appreciate what Barov Am Hadras Melech is supposed to be. Thank you very much.
Terrific. I'm turning to Simon next. Major.
Thank you so much, Phil. So I'm super optimistic about the future. We've seen that the youngsters, and not just the youngsters, are searching for religion, for spirituality more than ever. We've got to double down on the basics, and exactly like you said, Phil, on those one-on-one relationships, and to keep building on those. We're producing better literature than ever. We're about to launch our new website and really take what we've learned from our digital experience to the next level, and engage students and adults round the clock, and with better educators in ways which we've never done before, and take that to the next level. And we're gearing up for the biggest summer that we've ever had with taking thousands of students to Israel. You know, Mitzvah Hashem, we're all davening that should work out, but we're not stalling anything. We are marching ahead as if it's going to happen. And in Mitzvah Hashem, it should be, you know, the most transformational year that we've ever had. So yeah, all in all, we are extremely optimistic, and we're hoping to take all of our experiences from Corona forward and really keep building on what we've done and add that to the pre-Corona times, and it should be something really, you know, really remarkable.
I'll tell you, you guys, your optimism translates to optimism for me, and feeling great for me. And I'm going to go to sleep tonight feeling really good about the future. The only thing is, I just want to say that I've learned in the last 7 months, since I've had a minyan outside my house every day, twice a day, I've learned to respect my Rabbanim even more. I think Rabbi Trump and Rabbi Teitelbaum, I say to you, bow down to you, because what you do is unbelievable, and just even more impressed than I ever was. I'm going to turn to Dr. Abramson and ask him the same question, which is, are you optimistic or pessimistic about the future, and why?
I am so hugely optimistic that it's hard for people to be around me lately. I see so much phenomenal potential in what is happening today. Now, as you mentioned earlier, Mr. Rosen, the scope of the tragedy for those families who have been so horribly affected by this is something that we can't put in the scales. But if we were to artificially kind of step out of this crisis that we're going through on a health level, oh my gosh, there is so much happening. The future is so bright. As a famous group of rabbis once said, I gotta wear shades. I'm thinking Rabbi Sufrin probably knows those rabbis. And I just put down the deposit on my own teenager to go to Israel with NCSY this summer. I am feeling so fantastic. I will tell you one small aspect of why I am so optimistic, and then I can set my microphone on mute again. So one of the greatest challenges we had in the college is trying to offer students choice. And so we created something we called a hybrid model. Terminology is used a little differently in different institutions, but basically it's where we have a live instructor in the room with live students, with simultaneously other students participating via Zoom. So it's like a split class. Could have 20 students on Zoom and 10 in the room, vice versa, that kind of thing. And it was really hard to figure out how to do it well. The technology was there. We spent a lot of time experimenting with different cameras and different video monitors and things like that. But you know what was the absolute hardest thing of all of it? Was to teach wearing a mask. That was incredibly difficult to do because we didn't realize how much we use our face when we explain things to students, whether that you're being sarcastic, whether you're being, trying to emphasize a point. It's very hard to convey all this when half of your face is covered. We managed to get through it, and we're doing it successfully. But here's the point. Can you imagine how phenomenal this will be when we get to take off the masks? All of a sudden, our reach, our potential to engage students all over the world is going to be so much larger. You know, I think we're on the verge of a bold new era in higher education, and specifically in Jewish education, because we were able to find those nitzotzos, those little sparks scattered everywhere, who can never come to a proper shiur, who can never come to a decent Jewish history class because they're locked in some backwoods school like, I don't know, Harvard or something, right? We'll be able to really reach out to those people with the new technologies that we have in hand. So I am incredibly optimistic about the future.
Beautiful. So I'll just thank you very, very much. I'll just conclude with one point. First of all, I want to thank everybody, the panelists and the participants, people listening. I know you had, this is like that commercial. I know you have other choices. This is the airline commercial. I know you have other choices, and I appreciate your selecting this one. I know that Rav Herschel Schachter's on another line on Zoom, and I know that the Yankees are playing in the playoffs. So there are a lot of options, and I appreciate that you picked this one. My guess is you did it really because of the panelists and Rabbis Trump and Teitelbaum. So I thank you all for participating. I just want to say that this is an important stage in our lives, and the transition from pre-pandemic to post-pandemic, just nicely said before. The pandemic will obviously be something we will always remember. The sad parts of the pandemic will be traumatic for many of us for a very long time. But as we come out of this, and as we go into the new world, it's my very strong belief that we will take some great things with us. And again, not just Zoom, but I think we're going to take with us a lot of meaningful changes in our lives, whether it's eating dinner with our kids. You know, I forgot to mention that I got to spend an enormous amount of time with my 2.5-year-old granddaughter. And today she joined me on a Zoom call on a client of mine, and she just wasn't going to say no. So she sat on my lap and she watched and she listened. And those are things that, literally I never thought in my life I'd be able to experience that joy. So we will take some good things out of this, and we'll take it with us and improve the world, hopefully, going forward. So Rabbi Trump, I thank you very much for the opportunity to participate and to be part of this. And I hope we did good. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Phil. Thank you, everybody, for taking the time this evening. This is incredibly inspirational, and there's a lot of positive energy here. Be'ez Hashem, with leaders like these, we have a bright future ahead as we build out of our diras keva into our diras arai. And as you said beforehand, as we bring that back into our buildings, we'll hopefully be even more prouder and even stronger and resilient there afterwards. Be'ez Hashem, it should be a piska tova, a good night for everybody. Thank you so much, everybody, for taking the time to be here this evening.
Thank you.